The most broken weapon in any genius's toolbox is lateral thinking, the ability to crack complex problems where there's no obvious solution by seeing things in a way that most other people won't. But when that gets translated to anime, it is so boring because it just looks like the author pulling an answer out of thin air. Because the beauty of lateral thinking isn't the solution, but it's how you get to the solution. And this is where Ayanokoji is cracked. Every single novel hits him with a web of complex mysteries, but in reality, it's the author challenging us, the reader. Because if you can think outside the box like Ayanokoji, you can solve the problem before he can. And the first challenge starts the second he steps foot in a new environment. The Advanced Nurturing High School was advertised to Ayanokoji as a government-run institution that's going to train the future leaders of Japan. But this place was lying to him from day one, because in practice it was way too good to be true. The place was the size of an entire city with every amenity imaginable. Paradise on earth. But that all starts falling apart when Ayanokoji meets his homeroom teacher Sai as he's enrolled in Class D. Because one of the running themes in Classroom of the Elite is how it's a microcosm for politics. And when it comes to manipulation, no one does it better than politicians. The way they twist their words to mislead their audience. And it's within Sai's words that Ayanokoji realizes something is terribly wrong. When Sai briefs her class, she introduces the S system, where private points act as money in every way imaginable. 1 point being 1 yen. And you can use them to buy anything on campus, with every single student in their class getting 100,000 points each. Sai further explains that points will be deposited into their account every month, so everyone understood that 100,000 points was their monthly allowance. Ayanokoji is suspicious because that's an absurd number. For reference, 100,000 yen is $650 per month, by the way. And right away, Ayanokoji catches a contradiction. Sai tells the students to be careful with their spending. But if you get 100,000 points per month, why be careful? That's so much money. What made even less sense was that in the same exact breath, Sai reveals details that would get the students to spend more. Like how upon graduation, the points would be rendered useless, so you might as well go crazy while you're here. Or how they can transfer points to others in case they don't want to spend them. So which one is it? Be careful or not? Both those ideas can't coexist. And with that, Ayanokoji notices an even deeper contradiction. Remember in the beginning, I mentioned how the school was advertised? A place to train the future leaders of Japan. But how would giving high school kids absurd amounts of money accomplish that goal? Wouldn't it do the opposite? Wouldn't it create irresponsible habits that are really hard to break? And it's not like this is a cheap experiment. Ayanokoji calculates that there are 40 students in each class, 4 classes per grade. Each student gets 100,000 yen per month. That's a total of 480 million yen a year. $3 million US for just one grade to operate for a year. Is that a smart decision for a premier government-run institution to make? Now, if these were the cream of the crop, the most accomplished students across all of Japan, maybe you can make an argument. Individuals on that level could be entitled to such a reward, but as far as Ayanokoji could see, these are just normal kids. And Sai explains that the school evaluated the proficiency of these kids and deemed them worthy of this financial reward. A doubtful claim to say the least, because while some did look like model students, namely Horikata, Ayanokoji's neighbor, others had Ayanokoji wonder how they even got here. But what really makes Ayanokoji question everything is when Sai mentions the topic of bullying. She says that there are strict consequences for it, but that's obvious. Anyone that's been a part of any school system can tell you that bullying will get you in trouble if you're caught. But there are a lot of things that can do that. Cheating, bringing in things that are illegal, harassing people. Why only mention bullying? Is there a special reason the school doesn't like it? Are those other forms of misbehavior not punished equally? And Ayanokoji knows how a person presents themselves often tells you more about the validity of their words than the actual words coming out of their mouth. From the second Sai entered the room, Ayanokoji analyzed her from head to toe, and she looked like the definition of discipline. A strict teacher who abides by the rules. Would a person like that really make mistakes and say contradictory things? And remember, this is supposed to be one of Japan's best institutions. Would they really make a mistake in picking their future leaders, especially when they're investing hundreds of millions of yen into them per year? After Sai's speech, Ayanokoji had more questions than he did answers. So he goes out into the world to see how much of what Sai said was actually legit. And Ayanokoji noticed that there are cameras scattered throughout the entire school, an important clue for later. And one of Sai's claims was correct, that the prices in the store at school did match those in real life. 1 point was 1 yen. Private points acted as money in every way, but Ayanokoji noticed a clue that brought all his worries to life. There was a stand with free items available, each one a daily necessity like bandages or toothbrushes. But they were only limited to 3 per person. Why would this exist? Everyone is getting 100,000 points per month. Even if they spent like absolute degenerates, there is no way they're not gonna have enough points for necessities. And given the absurd allowance, they should have a lot of points saved without even trying. In no universe should they ever need handouts. And if they do overspend time and time again to the point where they need free necessities, are these the people you want leading Japan? Wouldn't that again call into question the school's judgment? So Ayanokoji wonders, why are the free handouts necessary? It calls into question the entire idea that they would get 100,000 points per month. And Ayanokoji remembers back to the words Sai said. Like a politician, she never said that they would get 100,000 points per month. She said that points would be deposited in their account every month. Everyone assumed the number was 100,000. Maybe it's not. Or maybe it's dependent on something. Because clearly there are people in the school that do not have points, so they have to resort to handouts so often that they need to restrict it to 3 per person. And this is where Ayanokoji's ability to think laterally lights the way. When his classmates listened to Sai, they only took her in one context, a serious teacher explaining the rules to her students. What if Ayanokoji entertained a different context? What if Sai's speech, rather than an explanation, was a test to see if they could catch the secrets behind her words? Because clearly there's a different meaning based on her words. If it's a fact, it is accurate. Like 1 point does indeed equal 1 yen. But when Sai intentionally leaves her language vague, there's room for more. Like when she says points will be deposited in their account every month without specifying the exact number. Ayanokoji thinks back to a similar statement Sai made, that the school judged the proficiency of the students in his class, awarding them each 100,000 points. But what did Sai mean by proficiency? What are they proficient in that merits them each 100,000 points? So Ayanokoji entertains a hypothetical, say that the proficiency that they're measuring are academics and discipline, which would be normal for most schools. Given how serious Horikita, his neighbor, is about studying, she would warrant that reward. Her evaluation in the eyes of the school would allow for it. However, the next clue Ayanokoji witnesses runs completely counter to this. After his shopping session, Ayanokoji runs into Sudo, a delinquent from his class. The only time Sudo spoke up was to say academics is useless to him, and he's only here for basketball. And at the convenience store, Sudo picks a fight with 3 different seniors and even Horikita after. If the school evaluated both Sudo and Horikita in terms of academics and discipline, they do not deserve the same number of points. Just looking at them, you can tell Horikita scored way better than Sudo on the entrance exams. But what about sports? What if the school evaluated both sports and academics equally? Then they would merit the same number of points if Sudo was actually that good at basketball. However, like I mentioned before, Ayanokoji noticed a lot of students that had neither academics nor sports. Frankly, they showed no redeeming qualities that would warrant them any points near Sudo or Horikita's. In fact, given the vast differences between individuals, could you realistically judge every single one of the 40 students and determine they all deserve the same exact number of points? That's ridiculous. So how were they evaluated? Because it did happen, since Sai mentioned it as a fact, and Ayanokoji established that Sai is truthful when it comes to facts. 1 point does equal 1 yen. And when Ayanokoji notices the argument between Sudo and the seniors, he finds the answer. When the seniors learn that Sudo is from Class D, they start making fun of him. The implication being that Class D in some way is inferior to the other classes. But Ayanokoji didn't just look at the words, but he also studied how the seniors acted, calling Sudo inferior as if it was matter of fact, meaning that this wasn't their subjective opinion trying to be nasty, but public knowledge. And given how Sudo was collectively judged to be inferior for being a part of Class D, what if the students in his class also received the points as a collective? What if they were evaluated as a collective rather than individuals? For example, if you're a part of Class D, you will get 100,000 points. In that world, everyone receiving the same number of points does make sense. However, there was something even more troubling in what the seniors said, because the second implication of them making fun of Sado is that there's a hierarchy to the classes, where Class D sits at the very bottom, so it's okay to make fun of them. But that also means that there's a way the hierarchy is determined. And for the first time since arriving here, Ayanokoji finally sees how the school will test leadership by seeing who can carry their class to the top of the hierarchy. And just by the sheer knowledge that there is a hierarchy, there must be a mechanism in place that places classes at the very top or the very bottom. And the mechanism must be fair, but more importantly, impartial. Otherwise, the hierarchy is useless because without fair competition, what exactly are you testing? It was safe for Ayanokoji to assume that within every single class, each person was awarded 100,000 points to equalize competition. So whatever determines the winners and losers in this hierarchy must be independent from the 100,000 points they received. And this is when Ayanokoji digs around everything Sai said to find the clue that ties it all together. It all comes back to language and seeing things in a different way. Throughout Sai's speech, she mentioned private points, but the word itself has an implication that there's more than one kind of point. Because if private points were the only thing you needed to operate, then why would you need the designation of private? Wouldn't you just call it points? And the name suggests privacy, meaning that these points are private to the individual. So the opposite of that must exist, points that are not private but public, and in this case, belonging to the class. And Ayanokoji theorizes that this public point system might be the mechanism that decides the hierarchy of classes, leading Ayanokoji to the realization that the school will leave out bits of crucial information to test to see whether or not the students can figure it out. Which begs the question, what other piece of information did Sai leave out that's gonna come back to slap them in the face? She hid the information that there are two types of points. She didn't specify how many private points that they would get next month, and she didn't even mention the hierarchy of classes, which makes Ayanokoji think about the last thing Sai said that gave him pause. She mentioned that bullying has serious consequences. At the time, the implication was that maybe other forms of misbehavior weren't punished as harshly, but after uncovering that the school will deliberately test you and Sai will deliberately hide crucial information, the implication is clear. Sai did not mention the other offenses to test them, to see if they could decipher her words to figure it out. And it's the first test that will determine where they land on this hierarchy. And if his classmates aren't able to realize this and they misbehave, it will be a disaster. And what solidified this answer was the number of cameras Ayanokoji noticed throughout campus. They're being watched to see if they misbehave, and that's how they'll be evaluated next month. We see proof that Ayanokoji figured this out when he fixes up the damage Sudo caused on his rampage right in front of a camera. So within the first two scenes, Ayanokoji figured out the class system, the existence of class points, and the nature of the special exams where the teachers will withhold information. Why do I know? Because I was able to reach the same conclusion Ayanokoji did by piecing together every clue he notices. And he knew all of this a week in advance before the big reveal where his class was pushed to the very bottom. If he wanted to, he could have saved all of them, but he deliberately chose not to. And as for the reason why, I made a great video covering that you should be able to see on the screen right now.